My name's Robin, and I had just celebrated my 26th birthday a few weeks ago. Life was good. I was engaged to Jake, my college sweetheart, and our wedding was right around the corner. Everything seemed perfect until my mom decided to throw a wrench in the works. I was lounging on the couch, flipping through a bridal magazine when my phone buzzed. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I answered with a cheerful, "Hey, Mom, what's up?" "Robin, honey, I need your opinion," she said, her voice laced with excitement. "What kind of suit do you think would look best on Tom when he walks you down the aisle?" "I'm thinking maybe blue, but maybe black is more traditional?" I blinked, confused. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "Grandpa's walking me down the aisle." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, "What?" "No, Tom's doing it. He's got a teenage daughter, and he wants to practice. You know, to get a feel for when it's her turn." I sat up straight, my magazine forgotten. "Practice?" "Mom, I'm not some dress rehearsal for your boyfriend's future father of the bride moment. Grandpa's walking me down the aisle, end of story." "But Tom." "I don't care about Tom," I shouted, surprising myself with the intensity of my anger. "I'm not going to be his guinea pig. If he wants to practice so badly, tell him to find some other wedding to crash." "Robin Elizabeth Carter, you listen to me." I hung up. The phone immediately started ringing again, but I ignored it, tossing it aside as if it had burned me. As I sat there, my heart pounding, memories started flooding back. Dad's face, his warm smile, the way he used to swing me around in the backyard. He'd died when I was 10, leaving a gaping hole in our lives that Mom had desperately tried to fill. I remembered the parade of men that followed, all truckers from the transportation company where Mom worked. She'd bring them home, introducing each one as the one, her future husband, my future stepfather. But they never lasted long. Mom was intense, clingy. She'd scare them off, and then the next one would appear, another Mr. Right in a never-ending cycle. As I sat there, lost in memories, I couldn't help but remember how I'd sought refuge with my grandparents during those tumultuous years. They were my safe haven, a stark contrast to the chaos at home. I was about 13 when things really started to get out of hand. One day, I came home from school to find Mom in a screaming match with some woman I'd never seen before. "You home-wrecking bitch," the stranger shrieked, her face red with fury. "That's my husband." Mom, never one to back down, fired right back. "He told me he was single. Don't blame me for your marital problems." And there, lounging in our ratty armchair, was Mom's latest boyfriend. I think his name was Dave or Dan. I honestly couldn't keep track anymore. He was watching the two women fight with a smug grin on his face, like it was some kind of twisted entertainment. I stood frozen in the doorway, my backpack slipping off my shoulder. "Mom?" I called out weakly. Both women whirled to face me. The stranger's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Is this your daughter?" she spat at Mom. "Does she know what kind of woman her mother is?" "Leave her out of this," Mom yelled back. Dave Ordand finally stood up. Ladies, he drawled. "No need to fight. There's plenty of me to go around." The stranger let out a strangled scream and lunged at him. I took that as my cue to bolt, locking myself in my room until the shouting stopped. That night, I heard Mom crying through the thin walls of our apartment. Dave Ordan had left with his wife, and Mom was alone again. As I grew older, things didn't get better. By the time I was 15, I was doing everything I could to avoid being home. It wasn't just the revolving door of Mom's boyfriends anymore, it was the way they looked at me. I remember one guy, Rick, eyeing me up and down as I grabbed a snack from the kitchen. "Your girl's filling out nicely," he told Mom. Mom just laughed. "She takes after me," she said proudly, completely oblivious to how uncomfortable I was. I started spending more time at the library, at friends' houses, anywhere but home. But Mom didn't get it. She'd call me selfish for not wanting to hang out with her and her latest flame. "Robin, honey," she said one day, "come meet Jeff. He's great with kids." We could be such a happy family, the three of us. I looked at Jeff, saw the way his eyes roved over me, and felt sick. No thanks, I muttered, retreating to my room. That night, I called my grandpa. Can I come stay with you for a while? I asked, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. Of course, sweet pea, he said without hesitation. You're always welcome here. It didn't take long for my grandparents to notice something was wrong. One evening, as we sat around their kitchen table, the words just tumbled out of me. I told them everything, the parade of men, the uncomfortable stares, Mom's obliviousness to it all. By the time I finished, Grandma had tears in her eyes, and Grandpa's face was set in a hard line I'd never seen before. That's enough, he said, his voice low and firm. We're putting a stop to this right now. The next day, we drove to Mom's place. Grandpa didn't waste any time. Carol, what you're doing is immoral and dangerous. You're bringing strange men into your home with a young girl present. Do you have any idea what could happen? Mom's face flushed red. How dare you, she shrieked. You've never wanted me to be happy. You're trying to ruin my life. Your life? Grandpa shot back. What about Robin's life? What about her safety? Robin's fine, Mom insisted. She's just being dramatic. So what, you're going to take her away from me, is that it? Grandpa nodded. Robin's coming to live with us. You can sort out your personal life without putting her at risk. Fine, Mom spat. Take her. It'll be easier to find a good man without a teenager cramping my style anyway. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd known, deep down, that Mom saw me as a burden sometimes, but hearing her say it out loud, it hurt more than I'd expected. Grandma squeezed my shoulder. Go pack your things, sweetie, she said softly. I nodded, heading to my room in a daze. As I threw clothes into a duffel bag, I could hear Mom and Grandpa still arguing in the living room. When I came back out, Mom was standing by the door, arms crossed. So this is it, huh, she said. You're choosing them over me? I looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time. She seemed smaller somehow, more fragile. For a moment, I saw the scared, lonely woman behind the brash exterior. I'm choosing me, Mom, I said quietly. I hope someday you'll understand that. She didn't answer, just turned away as I walked out the door with my grandparents. As we drove away, I watched my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt safe. Living with my grandparents was like stepping into a different world. Gone were the late-night arguments, the parade of strange men, and the constant tension. Instead, I found myself surrounded by love, stability, and support. I still went to the same school, saw the same friends. But everything felt different, better. I could focus on my studies without worrying about what, or who, I'd find when I got home. Mom was Mom. She'd call occasionally, usually to talk about her latest boyfriend or to complain about work. She rarely asked about me, and when she did, she didn't seem to really listen to the answers. When graduation day rolled around, I was surprised to see her there. She sat with my grandparents, looking uncomfortable and out of place. You look nice, honey, she said after the ceremony, giving me a quick hug. Listen, I've got to run. I've got a date with this great guy I met at work. You understand, right? And just like that, she was gone. I watched her rush off, feeling a mixture of hurt and relief. My grandparents helped me move into my dorm room that fall, setting me up with everything I needed for college. I'd decided to study to become an investment manager, fascinated by the world of finance and planning. That's where I met Jake. We were in the same introduction to financial markets class, both of us bright-eyed freshmen with big dreams. We became friends first, study buddies who'd quiz each other late into the night at the campus coffee shop. It wasn't until our senior year that things shifted. We were working on a group project, hunched over spreadsheets in the library, when Jake suddenly looked up at me. Robin, he said, his voice serious. I think I'm in love with you." I blinked at him, surprised. And then I realized I felt the same way. Our relationship blossomed quickly after that. Jake was kind, smart, and stable, everything I'd never had in my life with Mom. When he proposed after graduation, I didn't hesitate to say yes. I saw Mom a few times during those years, usually when I'd stop by her place during breaks. Her new boyfriend, Tom, was always there, younger than her, with slicked back hair and a cocky grin. "Robin, this is Tom," Mom had said, beaming. "He's got a daughter, 7 years younger than you. Isn't that great?" I'd smiled politely, not sure what to say. Tom had looked me up and down in a way that made me uncomfortable, reminding me of all those boyfriends from years ago. After reliving all these memories, I knew I needed to talk to Grandpa. Jake and I drove out to my grandparents' house one weekend, the weight of Mom's demand heavy on my mind. "Grandpa," I said as we sat in their cozy living room, "Mom called me about the wedding. She wants her boyfriend Tom to walk me down the aisle. Says he wants to practice for when his own daughter gets married." Grandpa reached out and took my hand. "Robin, I'd be honored to walk you down the aisle. But if you wanted to choose Tom or anyone else, I'd understand. It's your day." I shook my head, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "There's no choice to make, Grandpa. It's always been you." Jake, sitting next to me, squeezed my other hand. "I support whatever Robin wants," he said. "She's told me about everything you've done for her, sir. I can't think of anyone better to give her away." Grandpa smiled, his eyes suspiciously moist. "Well then," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, "I guess we'd better start practicing our walk, hadn't we?" As we all laughed, I felt a wave of love and gratitude wash over me. This was my real family, the people who'd stood by me, supported me, loved me unconditionally. And in a few short weeks, I'd be adding Jake to that family officially. I thought I'd put an end to Mom's ridiculous demands, but apparently, I'd underestimated her determination. The calls kept coming, each one more insistent than the last. "Robin, you need to reconsider," Mom pleaded one evening. "Tom's really upset. If you don't let him walk you down the aisle, he might leave me." "Then maybe he's not the right guy for you," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "Look, I'm busy planning my wedding. Can we please drop this?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Mom spoke again, her voice was cold. "Fine. If that's how you want to play it, I won't come to your wedding at all." Something inside me snapped. "You know what? Fine. Don't come. It's not like you've been a real mother to me anyway." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking. Part of me felt guilty for lashing out, but a bigger part felt relieved. Like I'd finally said what I'd been holding back for years. Days passed, and I started to think maybe that was the end of it. Maybe Mom had finally gotten the message. I threw myself into wedding planning, grateful for the distraction. But then, about a week later, I was at work when my boss, Mr. Johnson, called me into his office. As soon as I walked in, I knew something was wrong. Mom was there, mascara streaking down her face, with Tom hovering behind her like a bodyguard. "Robin," Mom cried, throwing herself at me. "How could you be so cruel to your own mother?" I stood frozen, completely blindsided. "Mom, what are you doing here?" She turned to Mr. Johnson, who was watching the scene with wide eyes. "Mr. Johnson, you have to talk some sense into her. She's breaking her poor mother's heart." Mr. Johnson stammered, clearly out of his depth. Mom barreled on, gesturing wildly between herself and Tom. "She won't let her parents walk her down the aisle at her wedding. Can you believe it? After everything we've done for her. Please, make her listen to reason." Before anyone could say anything else, Mom grabbed Tom's arm and stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Johnson leaned back in his chair, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "Robin, I think you owe me an explanation. What exactly is going on?" Haltingly, I began to explain about my childhood, about living with my grandparents, about Mom's revolving door of boyfriends. I told him about her insistence that Tom walk me down the aisle, and my refusal. To my surprise, Mr. Johnson's face softened as I spoke. When I finished, he let out a long sigh. "You know, Robin, your mother reminds me a lot of my ex-wife," he said, shaking his head. "I divorced her because of similar, dramatic tendencies. Always making everything about her, never considering how her actions affected others." Relief washed over me. "So, you understand?" He nodded. "I do. And I want you to know that I'm on your side here. Your wedding day is about you, not your mother or her boyfriend." I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I really appreciate that." However, he continued, his tone turning serious, "We can't have scenes like this at the office. It's unprofessional and disruptive. I need you to handle this situation, Robin. Make sure it doesn't happen again." As I left Mr. Johnson's office, relief gave way to anger. How dare Mom show up at my workplace like that? She could have cost me my job. My first stop was the security desk. I explained the situation to Dave, the head of security, showing him a picture of Mom and Tom on my phone. "These two are not to be allowed in the building under any circumstances," I said firmly. "If they show up, please call the police immediately." Back at my desk, I opened my email, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I typed out a message to Mom. "Mom, your behavior today was completely unacceptable. You had no right to show up at my workplace and cause a scene. You could have jeopardized my career with your selfish actions. I've tried to be patient with you, tried to explain my feelings, but you refused to listen. So let me be crystal clear, you are no longer invited to my wedding. Neither is Tom. I'm asking you, no, I'm telling you, to stay away from me. Don't call, don't email, don't show up at my work or my home. If you can't respect my boundaries, I'll have no choice but to take legal action. Robin." I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then sat back, feeling drained but oddly liberated. That evening, I told Jake what had happened. He wrapped me in a tight hug. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," he said. "But I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." We called my grandparents and Jake's parents, explaining the situation. To my relief, they all supported my decision. As Jake and I went through our wedding guest list that night, crossing off Mom and Tom's names, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Our wedding would be smaller now, but it would be filled with people who truly loved and supported us. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, squeezing my hand. I looked at him, at the love and concern in his eyes, and felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. "Yeah," I said, squeezing back. "I really am. And I meant it." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life, setting boundaries, and surrounding myself with people who genuinely cared about me. It wasn't how I'd imagined my wedding planning would go, but somehow, it felt right. The day I'd dreamed of for so long had finally arrived. I stood at the chapel doors, my heart fluttering with excitement. Grandpa, dapper in his tuxedo, squeezed my hand reassuringly. The music swelled, and we took our first step. But before we could even enter the chapel, a shrill voice cut through the air. "Stop right there." Mom came barreling down the aisle, Tom hot on her heels. She jabbed a finger at Grandpa. "You, move aside. Tom's walking Robin down the aisle." I couldn't believe it. After everything, she was still trying to make my wedding about her. "Mom, what are you doing here? You weren't invited. Please leave. Now." Mom's face crumpled, and the waterworks started. I'd seen this act too many times to be fooled. "How can you be so cruel? I raised you. I loved you after your father died." Grandpa, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Carol, that's enough. Everyone here knows the truth about who really raised Robin." I glanced around at our guests. Their faces showed a mix of shock, sympathy, and, was that a hint of amusement? Clearly, Mom's theatrics weren't winning her any fans. Mom must have noticed too, because her tactics suddenly changed. "Fine," she spat. "I don't need you, Robin. I have Tom. He appreciates me, unlike you. You've always been stupid and arrogant. I disown you." Before I could respond, Grandpa cut in, his voice cold. "Well, Carol, if that's how you feel, then I have something to say too. You're no longer welcome in my house, yes, my house. And I'm writing you out of my will." The change in Tom's demeanor was instant and almost comical. He paled, taking a step back from Mom. Carol. Sorry, but I didn't sign up for all this drama. Plus, without the house and inheritance, well, let's just say, I think I'd be better off finding a younger girlfriend. We're done." Mom's face contorted with rage. She let out a wordless scream, grabbing at her hair. "You're all against me. How dare you? I'll show you." Before she could finish her threat, 2 police officers who had been quietly called by one of the guests appeared at her side. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us," one of them said firmly. As they led Mom away, her shouts echoing through the chapel, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and oddly enough, a bit of pity. This was rock bottom for her, and part of me hoped it might finally be the wake-up call she needed. 30 minutes later, after I'd had a chance to touch up my makeup and calm my nerves, I once again stood at the chapel doors with Grandpa. As we walked down the aisle, I saw Jake waiting for me at the altar, his face full of love and concern. Our eyes met, and suddenly, all the drama of the past hour faded away. This was our moment, and nothing, not even my mother's antics, could take that away from us. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with laughter and happy tears. And as Jake and I shared our first kiss as husband and wife, I knew that whatever challenges life threw our way, we'd face them together, surrounded by the love and support of our true family. During the reception, guest after guest approached us, offering words of support and condemning my mother's behavior. "You handled that like a champ, Robin," my college roommate said, hugging me tight. "Your mom's got some nerve," Jake's uncle grumbled. "But you showed her what real class looks like." And as Jake and I drove off to start our honeymoon, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The drama with Mom was behind us now. We had a whole new life ahead of us, and I couldn't wait to see what adventures it would bring. It's been a year since the wedding, and life has settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. Jake and I live in a cozy apartment just a stone's throw from our offices. It's not huge, but it's ours, filled with love and laughter. Every morning, we walk to work together, hand in hand, talking about our plans for the future. The house where I grew up, the one Mom used to live in, now provides us with a steady stream of rental income. We've turned it into something positive, using the extra money to save for our future and occasionally splurge on weekend getaways. As for Mom, well, I hear things through the grapevine now and then. Apparently, she's renting a small apartment across town. And true to form, she's on the hunt for her next soulmate. Some things never change, I guess. I haven't spoken to her since the wedding. Sometimes I feel a twinge of guilt about that, but then I remember the years of chaos, the constant drama, the way she tried to hijack one of the most important days of my life. And I know I made the right choice. One sunny Saturday morning, as Jake and I are having breakfast on our tiny balcony, he asks, "Do you ever think about reaching out to your mom?" I take a sip of coffee, considering the question. Sometimes, I admit. But then I remember how peaceful our life is now, how drama-free. And I'm not ready to risk that. Jake nods, understanding. "You know I'll support whatever you decide, right?" I smile, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "I know. And that means everything to me." Later that day, we're walking through the park when we pass a mother and daughter having a picnic. They're laughing, heads close together, sharing some private joke. For a moment, I feel a pang of what might have been. But then I think about Grandma and Grandpa, who call every Sunday without fail. I think about Jake's parents, who have embraced me as a daughter. I think about our friends, who rallied around us during the wedding fiasco and have been our rock ever since. I realize that family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who stand by you, who support you, who love you unconditionally. And by that measure, I'm rich beyond my wildest dreams.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.